Hello, my name is Gavin. This is Genre Books. This is my last March Mystery Madness video for 2026. I have, again this year, been concentrating on my Marple Cinematic Universe. I have stretched the definition of Marple to include Christie's other characters, although Miss Marple has made an appearance last week. I have read about Tommy and Tuppence, and today the novel in question is Postern of Fate, the fifth of the Tommy and Tuppence books and the last. And the last video, the last Tommy and Tuppence book, it is also the last novel that Agatha Christie wrote. So there's a sense of finality to all of this. These books were written over the course of a half century. So The Secret Adversary was 1922. And I covered that in week 1 of March Mystery Madness. Tommy and Tuppence were in their very early 20s, just embarking on what would end up being a relationship lasting the test of time and full of adventure. We then revisited them in the late 1920s in a series of short stories cobbled together called Partners in Crime, which was just an absolute hoot. We then looked in again on the cusp of war, when war was just starting. So they're in their late 30s, early 40s for N or M, which is a book the type Buddy read with Hannah from Hannah's Books, a wartime espionage adventure which I absolutely loved. Then, by the pricking of my thumbs, they are in their mid-60s, I think, by the pricking of my thumbs, approaching retirement, beginning to feel age catch up with them a little bit. And here in Postern of Fate, so over the course of a month's worth of videos, they have gone from being in their early 20s to now in the early 70s, putatively retired, but never quite out of the game. There's no adaptation for Postern of Fate. I think there are 4 books by Agatha Christie of which there are no adaptations, and this is one of them. Christie, by the way, at this point was in her early 80s and about to hang up her writing utensils. In fact, she'd already hung up her writing utensils. She typed the vast majority of her books. The last few books, due to age, due to infirmity, were dictated. I tend to talk about Tommy and Tuppence and Christie interchangeably because I think that it's just such an interesting set of milestones in Christie's career, with such a short collection of books about them and spaced out as they are. You just see her at different stages in her style, in her writing. For Tommy and Tuppence, the pace of life is certainly slowing down, and I have to say that unfortunately the plotting from Christie also is suffering a little bit compared to what had gone before. It is not the most cohesive of mysteries. The writing perhaps is not what it was in her pomp. Again, due to health, due to, at this point I think, an undiagnosed dementia, and just to age. Her last novels, as I said, were dictated. rather than typed, and I don't know if that brought out the best in her. It's also notable that this book has an awful lot of dialogue. I don't know what the percentage would be, but it's a huge percentage of this book is dialogue compared to other of her works. I don't know if that is Christie trying to come to terms with dictating something, becoming more conversational if she is dictating rather than putting words on the page. This does two things. It makes it a bit more difficult to pick up on clues. It makes the mystery a little bit more elusive. But it does demonstrate just the lovely repartee that Tommy and Tuppence have. And whilst this book does get criticism from some quarters, I still really like it. It is a little bit indulgent. There are reminiscences from Tommy and Tuppence of their earlier cases. The reader might need these because of the big gaps between the books. The one that they remember or refer to most frequently and are reminded of themselves by other characters is N or M, which by the time they are doing this was a book that came out 30 years previously. There are also a number of instances in the book where Tommy and Tuppence are remembering things imperfectly or struggling to remember things and talking that through with each other in order to establish their own memories. This comes out much more in Tuppence just by dint of the fact that she's the one that starts most of the conversations. And I don't know whether Christie has seen Tuppence as the character she identifies with over the course of her career. Marple arrived on the scene already elderly when Christie was not. Tuppence has grown up alongside Christie. Maybe a few years younger, but throughout her entire life. I've grown to really like Tommy and Tuppence, so that the story doesn't quite have the zip and action of the previous ones, that we get more of their relationship is something I don't really mind. I quite liked all of the back and forth. Perhaps this is the cosy crime appeal, which I've always found to be a bit odd or elusive to me. But this is also a bit sad for me. I mean, I have the tendency to bite off more than I can chew when I go through sort of things I want to do on BookTube. And so last year, for example, I was certainly never going to read all of the Miss Marple books within March Mystery Madness. I'm absolutely not going to dent too much the surface of Poirot when I get to Poirot next year. But with only 5 books, I could go through the entire series in one thing, and I've completed something, and that, I suppose I feel a little bit empty after that. I'm going to miss them. They've been good fun. There was, again, no adaptation of Postern of Fate. But I do have one more adaptation to talk about. And maybe a ray of hope. There is another adaptation of Tommy and Tuppence in the works. I think it's being filmed at the moment. It's going to be out either later this year or early next year. So I might get a bit of a Tommy and Tuppence fix, even if it is no new literature. The adaptation I'm talking about today, however, is not an adaptation of Postern of Fate. And to be honest, I'd struggle to describe it as an adaptation at all. Whilst I may have had some criticism of the Marple episode that I covered in By the Pricking of My Thumbs, the ITV adaptation last week. This is on a whole other level. Associés contre le crime is a 2012 film from France. It is the third outing for this cinematic pairing, following Mon Petit Digimadi from 2005, which is really By the Pricking of My Thumbs, and Le Crime est notre affaire, Crime is Our Business, from 2008, which takes the Miss Marple story, 450 from Paddington, or What Mrs. McGillicuddy Saw, and gives the action of that film to Tommy and Tuppence. But it's not Tommy. We have here instead the character of Belissaire Beresford, and Tuppence reverts to her given name of Prudence. Prudence is played by Catherine Frott, who you may have seen in Le Dîner de Cons, and Belissaire by André Dussolier from A Very Long Engagement, the narrator from Amélie, and in the fantastic Encore en Hiver. This film is very French. This is more French than Jean-Paul Sartre dressed as Asterix. This is Frencher than Joan of Arc playing an accordion and smoking a gitan blanc. If I were to relay even half of the odd segues between scenarios that happen in this film, if I were to tell you the half of what occurs in this film, you'd probably think I was having a stroke. There is a science fiction element at play, but this is also a screwball comedy. There are carry-on film-like moments. There is wonderful Lake Geneva scenery, and there is full frontal nudity.
After all, miss, this is France.
It is disjointed, perplexing, confusing. The humour, I'm going to say, does not really translate. There is little, if any, peril, and barely anything that would remind you of Agatha Christie. The setup of the story is loosely based on one of the stories from Partners in Crime, but not that you'd know it, really. But I love their chemistry together, the two actors. Frott may we, the closest thing we have to the impetuosity and the energy of Tuppence from the books. Belissaire is, well, he's not Tommy. He is pretty much a buffoon, mostly here as an aid to what is a pretty broad comedy. But he does have a certain charm. I'd be happy to watch this couple together playing off against each other again. But I don't think I want to do it in a film like this. Glad I've seen it. I got to say though, when watching it, I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing.
Ambroise Lançon. Ah, ça vient. Ah non, c'est reparti. Non, je l'ai sur le... Bon, Bélissaire. Donne-moi une fessée.
Maintenant, tout de suite?
Oui, rien de tel pour stimuler ma mémoire. Allez. Ah, plus fort. Plus fort. Attends. Ambroise Lançon, né en 1901 dans la Vienne, Est reçu premier à l'école normale supérieure en 1919, docteur en sciences en 22, contribue à fonder le CNRS en 1939. Pendant la guerre, il est fait prisonnier par les Allemands, on le croit mort, il ressurgit en 1947 et poursuit des recherches fondamentales en électromagnétique. Encore un petit coup. Là, quelque chose a changé. Ses collaborateurs ne le reconnaissent plus. Il semble qu'il y ait des épisodes délirants. Il prétend avoir découvert le secret de l'éternelle jeunesse. Il organise des conférences sur la régénération des cellules, la courbe du temps et autres trucs du même genre.
However, there were 3 of these films. So, I must be missing something. I'm not sure, however, I was the intended audience. But yes, a head-scratching end to my experience this year with Tommy and Tuppence. And on the whole, the adaptations of Tommy and Tuppence have not been of the quality of the adaptations of Marple. But next year, when looking at Poirot, there are a wealth of adaptations to sample. I'm not going to be able to cover all of the different people who have played Poirot, but I'll give it a try. Until next year for March Mystery Madness, and until next time.